We have today in the studio Jimmy Bennington, a jazz artist from Rogers Park. Hi, Jimmy. How are you today?
Hello, I'm doing well. Good to see you. I'd like to thank my wizard for having me here. And this is my second appearance on WZRD.
Really? When was your last one? How far ago?
It was several years ago now, and it was back when I came in the evening and performed with a trio, the late Jeff Marks, and it was several years ago, and there was no interview or anything, just some playing.
Oh, so you were on our Thursday night live show then?
I believe so, yeah.
Oh, yes. You should do that again.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, first of all, please describe how your career began.
Well, I will say I'm not exactly from Rogers Park. I've been a resident there for many years now. But I'm kind of, I was born in the Midwest. I came up in Texas, and I moved to Chicago in 2006. And so, I lived on the West Coast for several years. And so anyway, but I've been a Rogers Parker, a Chicagoan since that time, since '06, and I really like it. I enjoy it, and have a lot of friends and good people around.
Mm-hmm. So did you start playing while you were in Texas or while you were in Rogers Park?
Yeah, I wanted to play ever since I was a little kid, but it didn't work out exactly until my family had relocated to Texas, and then I did begin playing an instrument and whatnot. And I think I had my first professional jobs in Houston, Texas as well, 1990.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, what songs do you play, and are they mostly originals or standards?
Well, just like with rock groups and things, when you first start out, you definitely have tunes that everyone knows, and that's how you can begin playing. And so, to me, the jazz has a wealth of standards, as you say, and also the Tin Pan Alley and things like that, Broadway show tunes. I mean, these are just classic melodies and songs that are just a part of our culture and part of the whole thing. And so I hope to, as Bill Evans said, I hope I never get tired of those. I hope I never abandon those. Mm-hmm. But that said, yes, more and more we always play original pieces, pieces that are kind of unknown by obscure musicians, and then pieces that a lot of the guys in my band contribute, and a few that I have also contributed.
So what inspires you to write a song?
Well, the song inspires me. It just kind of comes. I'm certainly not known as a composer. I think probably my other talent would be arranging. I think I'm a pretty good arranger. I know how things should go sometimes, but the few melodies that I have come up with, they just come to you, and if you're disciplined enough, you can make sure to capture it somehow. But they kind of nag at you, they kind of bother you until you realize them.
So, when did you start having your own band?
Well, I figured I had to, at some point, I probably had to have my own group because my phone wasn't ringing very much. And I kind of got the idea early on that if you want to do this, you're probably going to have to do it yourself. And so really, as soon as I got my professional drum set in 1990, when I turned 20, very soon after that, I probably a year or two or three, I started my own group. Mm-hmm. And I was in bands, but I actually was in an interesting group with a guy who's still a dear friend of mine, Charles Hardwick, Uncle Charlie, and we had a group called Thump and Bass, and it was just the two of us, and he played bass and I played drums, and he also doubled on harmonica. Wow. And we kind of did like a improvised kind of psychedelic rock, And then I got into jazz, and that's all she wrote. I didn't want to do anything really other than that. And that was, like I said, very early 1990s.
Mm. So we have playing in the background now your new album, Albany Park. Do you want to describe a little bit about how this album came to be?
Yeah, Steve Cohn, a very fine pianist and improviser and composer. Steve and I met in Chicago through someone else, and we were both sidemen on this project, a studio date. And Steve and I hit it off, and he told me, if you ever find your way into New York and New Jersey, give me a contact and let's do something. So we made our first record, No Lunch in Hackensack, for the Unseen Rain record label in New York. And then he came back here for a bit of a small tour, and we recorded all of those. But this particular performance, this house concert, I thought was very unique and beautiful, and so I wanted this to come out. And luckily for me, I sent it to Slam Records in the UK, and they loved it. Mm-hmm. So I now have a relationship with a new record label, and I'm very pleased about that. But that's really how it came about. I thought it was an addition to what Steve and I had done before.
So why did you name the album Albany Park? As you know, the neighborhood right next to Northeastern is Albany Park. We are in the North Park neighborhood.
Yeah, that's right. The where the house concert was in the Albany Park zone. So I thought that was a kind of a romantic name, mm-hmm. and also a literal geographical location of where we were. So.
Oh, nice. Okay, so what influenced your drumming?
What influenced my drumming? Well, I mean, I've had some mentors, some people who have been kind to me, but really, I always liked drums. Mm-hmm. Ever since I was, as early as I can remember, was about 5 years old. And I did not have too much contact with actual drums until I got into my teens, 13. And I liked almost just about everything to do with music and all that. And I thought the drummer had a very special role. But with that in mind, there were people, specifically one day I was with some friends. We went to a mall, and I wanted to... we were going to go and probably try to meet girls or something. But right away, there was this little trio, a jazz trio there. And to me, I'd never gotten to see a jazz drummer up close. And they were all in tuxedos and playing at some opening. And my friends didn't care for it. They went off, but I could not pull myself away. And so that was my very first contact with... I just admired what he was able to express and do mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
With his instrument. And since that time, there have been other people who have, mentored me and taken me under their wing, things like that.
Well, could you describe a little bit about one of your mentor relationships so that our students and our listeners could recognize a mentor when they see one? Sometimes people might have a relationship with a mentor without realizing that it is a mentor relationship.
Yeah, well, that's I'd be happy to do that. Essentially, a mentor to me is, if you boil it all down, is they're the person who is not going to always be nice and tell you what you want to hear. You're doing your thing, you want praise. Everyone wants praise, but the mentor actually may, at your highest moment, say, yeah, you're messing the time up, or hey, what happened to... That was the worst 5-stroke roll I've ever heard in my life,
Mm-hmm.
And they're just going to steer you into becoming better. And also they tell you the reality of things. And it may not, like I said, it may not be pleasant to hear that it may not all be a bed of roses, and so they're good at that. And, one guy I never forget he was a legendary drummer named G.T. Hogan. And he had performed with a lot of folks, Herbie Nichols. He roomed with Philly Joe Jones, a great drummer with Miles Davis. So anyway, he kind of had that style, that Philly Joe Jones type. And we used to meet and rub elbows at a jam session in Houston. And one night, he told me, James, you have to learn how to play the drums, not beat the drums. And I told him one night, I was tired of being nice about it. And I said, gee, man, God dang, GT, don't you ever have anything nice to say? And he said, hey, I don't have to tell you anything at all. I thought about that later, and I thought that's true. He didn't have to impart anything to me, but he did. And so maybe that's a tough mentor. There's all kinds out there. I have some dear friends who are very warm and kind, but they still will tell me things I don't want to hear, and I appreciate that honesty. So that to me is anyone who is helping you to get further and doesn't paint it in too pretty of a picture is most likely a mentor in your life, and you have to in turn respect them and admire them. That's what makes them a mentor to you, is you already are looking up to them, as it were.
So we have a lot of drumming students here, music students at Northeastern Illinois University. Can you tell me what is the difference between playing a drum and beating a drum?
Well, it's really kind of self-explanatory in the sense that, to me, music should be played. And obviously, if somebody's just beating on something, I'm not sure how much of a relationship they have with the instrument, because the drums want to talk, they want to sing. And I think when you beat them, you inhibit that singing, that the tones and the thing that they want to do. And so I think, and also you're fighting with gravity. Gravity, you have to work with the world, and when you do that, things are a lot more effortless. And you'll notice to me, I've heard very loud drummers. One of my mentors was Elvin Jones, the drummer for John Coltrane, a friend and a mentor for several years. Now, he had a reputation for playing very loudly, but if you sat up close, it was never a painful kind of a loud. It was a very musical kind of a volume. And I figured, yeah, he's playing the drums with great passion, but it never sounded ugly. It never was hard to the ear.
So the drum and the musician need to become almost like one in order to impart the music that needs to be brought out? Exactly.
There's just a subtlety there. And the greatest drummers all have this wonderful subtlety regardless of the volume they're playing. And I mean, anyone can just beat drums. Anyone can do that, but is it beautiful? Is it the great release? Is it the communion that we're looking for, the communication we're looking for? Maybe not. I don't know. But that said, I mean, I remember two young guys at a blues jam, and here's all these older guys knew what they were doing and all, and then these two young boys came in playing. They were brothers, I think, and they were playing. One played bass and one played drums, and they sat in, and yes, they didn't have a lot of the technical thing together, but their feeling, their attitude, and their approach, they won the room over. And they had the older guys, the more experienced musicians, will say, scratching their heads. And I thought, well, that's the other thing. If you have to keep the passion involved, you have to keep that spirit happening. It doesn't matter how great technically you become. If you lose that, very few people, I think, are going to want to hear you.
That's very interesting. Wow. So how do you access gigs?
How do I obtain gigs? Yeah, how do I get them? That's harder and harder to do, I think, as each day passes. I remember a time when it was a lot more cut and dry. You presented the venue or the agent who books things with your accomplishments, and the agent, whether he liked your face or not, or your clothes or your hair or whatever it was, he gave you a chance because of what you had obviously accomplished. And nowadays I find it's quite different, and you just have to develop relationships And you have to remember this too. And I just came to this after, 28 years in the field as of last May. But I'm asking to play, but I'm also offering to play. And so I will only ask however many times and inquire before I go ahead and give up now, because otherwise you've got thousands of unanswered contacts and venues, hundreds of things that you have to keep following up on. They don't write you back. They just make it very difficult. And so I say, look, if you want me to play, the answer is yes. And I will only ask and offer a certain amount of times within reason. And generally that's about 6 months to a year, sometimes more. In the past, I would go for several years trying to get into a place. But as I approach 50 years old, I just say, hey, I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm not begging anyone to do this. So that's that. But yes, gigs in these times are very, it's a challenge. And I think that's why a lot of artists don't want to be a band leader, because it is a lot of extra work and sometimes not too much reward. But I try to understand. I can explain things a lot better by way of a story, always. And one of the stories is a dear friend of mine, David Haney. He owns Cadence Jazz Magazine, and he's also a fine pianist. And he told me about a gig he booked in Berlin, and it was at a top club there. And he said, it was so hard to book that thing into, writing back and forth and all these problems. And several months of his life was taken up by this pursuit. And he said, when I got there, I didn't want to see the club owner. I didn't want to meet the agent. I did not even want to see the musician I was going to play with. But he said, but after about the first, halfway through the first song, I looked out to the audience and I realized they don't know anything about any of this. All they know is that you're here and they're there and they want to hear some music. And so from that moment on, he played beautifully and he tried to forget everything. But those things are hard to forget. You kind of had your spirit crushed before you're allowed to set up your instruments. So it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for people who give up easily, who don't have patience. You must have a lot of patience. And as I say, you have to remember you're offering something as well, and hopefully it's something beautiful.
Yes, you have to maintain that passion for your work. Yes,
and these agents and bookings and all, that's just a necessary evil. It's just part of what you have to go through. And I didn't really count on so many gatekeepers, as I call them, the gatekeepers. But
Yes.
I didn't factor them in when I was practicing and trying to learn the history of the music and become a good musician. And it's my fault. That's my flaw. And if I could do it again, I would pay a lot more credence to these people who can decide whether you get to perform or not. I mean, it's quite a bit of power that they have.
Mm-hmm. How long were you playing before you produced your first song?
My first original piece, probably, this was like probably 1996. I did some arranging, and I also co-composed a piece called Kobe. There was an earthquake in Kobe, Japan during this time, and we made a dedication to them, to the victims of that tragedy. So that was 1996, and they come my own songs are few and far between, but original music and presenting things like that. About 1996, doing things.
So was it part of an album?
Yeah, it's an out of print record now that I hope to have back out, called Contemplation, and some fine Houston musicians. This was recorded just before I left Houston, and one reason I recorded that record was because my colleague, saxophonist, was moving to Korea, I believe, to Seoul, and I thought I may never see him again, so I booked the studio and tried to capture what we had been working on.
What advice do you have for student performers?
Just to really to keep a song in your heart. This is easier said than done with the way the vagaries of life and of this field, this music field. But I think if you keep a song in your heart and remember that it's the music that you're dealing with, not all the other accoutrements that come with this whole thing. It's about that. And I think if you're honest with that and you pursue what you love, and if you're honest with yourself about how good you really are, how good you would like to become, these are the things that are going to help you along. And I think if you do that, you can meet anyone anywhere in the world, and you will be on an equal footing with them. But many people get sidetracked by other things, other considerations. And years ago, my boyhood friend of mine said, what do you want to do with music? And I said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to be into all the new stuff and the next big thing, and that's why I'm watching these pop acts and seeing what they're doing, what they're wearing, and all this. And he said, what do you want to do, Jimmy? And I said, I want to play something cool on the drums. That's my entire goal, and I don't care anything other than that. I want to make music with other people. I don't want to play at them. I want to play with them and see what we can create.
So when you play for audiences, do you ever find yourself playing with the audience, feeling their vibe, and then improvising to accommodate them?
Well, you're not playing to them. I mean, they're there hopefully because they enjoy what we're doing, but I don't play to the audience. I play the music, and I play what I interpret it the way I feel it should be, and I hope that people enjoy that. But no, and of course on a subtle level, if you've got a real grim audience, it may affect you a certain way. If you have a very upbeat, raucous kind of a room, that's another thing. And subtly you can perform in a way that they will appreciate. But no, I never cater to the audience specifically.
So you have encountered all different types of audiences, from the rockers to the other ones?
Yeah, I mean, well, look here. If you're going to play some jazz or even modern jazz or avant-garde or whatever it's called, and you're in an area where people express that they do not like what you're doing, are you just going to stop doing that and play Freebird or some popular song that everybody knows and can sing along with just because you want them to, no, you're going to stick with what you do. And I think even if people don't like it, I think they respect that you stick with your guns and what you wanted to present. It's your moment to you're in the seat playing, so it's what you would like to do. But I don't ever seek to turn the audience off or to totally ignore them. No, I appreciate them very much. But no, we play for ourselves, for each other, and for the music.
So have you ever played impromptu, like let's say you were at a location and then someone asked you to join in?
Oh yeah, sitting in and things like that. I've had some
Yes.
great moments like that. And yeah, you want to fit in with what the group is doing. Sure, I mean, if I play blues, if I go to the Kingston Mines and sit in and play some blues, I'm not going to play all my fancy jazz things because that's totally inappropriate. It's not right for that area. And if you're a guest also, you don't want to take over the whole thing because you're the big star and you're coming in to show everybody what you got. This, we used to see drummers. We used to make fun of certain drummers that when they would see us come in, they would start showing off. And I thought to myself always, the way you could really show off is to close your eyes and play that music, but you're trying to impress me, another drummer, and I'm sure it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to do very much.
So what is the name of your current band?
The original name was Midnight Choir, Jimmy Bennington Midnight Choir, but I changed that in the early 2000s, I think, to Color and Sound, and I spell color in the British spelling. But yeah, Jimmy Bennington Color and Sound, and that's the name of the group, and I think it connotes what I'm trying to do.
So when for color, is that more of the mood that you're denoting?
It is that it's different things. It's a mood. It's almost hard to even describe, but it's like a feeling, an attitude, an essence of something. It's not just an actual color with pigmentation. I mean, it's the feeling, the flair that you bring, the certain thing that you have that no one else is doing, and that's at least I like to think that it is.
Mm-hmm. So where do you play? Do you play across the country, mostly in Chicago? Where are your venues?
Yeah, well, they change all the time. Hopefully you develop relationships with venues to where it gets to the point where, you've got 6 or more places that you regularly put in appearances at because you've worked on that. But, the people who do the booking often change, and the relationship that you built up becomes null and void when the new guy comes in. That often happens. And but I'm based in Chicago. Just recently, this past summer, we started performing out in. I've started playing out in Kalamazoo at the university out there, South Bend, Indiana. I play in Evanston quite a bit. I have a long-standing residency at the Century Theater, the Rhythm Room Bar and Bistro out there, for several years now. So I work there many Saturdays, every Saturday except the first of the month, in fact. Mm-hmm. And that's several years running, and it's more of a piano trio, small trio type of a feeling, with more standards and interpreting standards and old forgotten tunes. That's kind of what I enjoy doing at that place. Also, the first Sunday of every month, I'm featured at the Heartland Cafe Bar, formerly the Red Line Tap in Rogers Park. And I wish I asked the Rogers Parkers, come out to this venue. I'd hate to see it fold up, but I think they did some remodeling, and a lot of folks are not aware that they can hear some quality entertainment for a very affordable price. So, but that's both of those shows are 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
Every time, and then I can't. My mind is. I would just played at Andy's Jazz Club, and hopefully we'll be back there. I was there for a Friday and Saturday night, and that was a gig that took several years to get, and many people I think would have given up, but I had a feeling, and so I just tried not to go crazy about it. But I did finally secure a booking, and I wouldn't do any of this if I didn't believe in what I was doing, or if something wasn't pushing me to do it. It's easy to give up on things, but I'm glad I stick with it in the moments like that, when you're playing at a good place and people really like you, and then it's worth it. You put the effort out, and then you got to forget everything and play well, and that's a whole other thing, But yeah. So very good places. I wish I could think of them all right now. We did the Green Mill a couple years ago.
Oh.
I've played at the Chicago Jazz Festival. I will be at the Glenwood Avenue Arts Fest again this year. It's the South Stage. You'd have to look at the schedule to see the exact date, but
I think it's August 17th and 18th. I'm pretty sure.
And I'm probably, I think I'm on the Saturday at like 3 o'clock, the South Stage, as a matter of fact. And I've got the good group. I mean, my working band is Fred Jackson Jr., Artie Black, Dustin Lorenzi. They're fine saxophonists and composers. Mike Harmon, Davi Priest, very good bassists. That I alternate with, and then various special guests we have occasionally. This coming Sunday, the 22nd, I'll be at Cultivate Urban Rainforest and Gallery, and that's right there in Evanston, right on the main L stop. And that's a really interesting place. I know that David Murray and Kahil El-Zabar have played there. I saw my friend, a fine cellist, Ben Davis, perform. And so they're very kind people, and they really seem to care a lot about the music being real and from your heart. And so on that, the proprietor told me, I love your new CD. Is there a chance that you and Mr. Cohn can play? And I asked Steve, and he said, I'm just gonna do it. He's got some other things he's doing. And so that Saturday, the 21st, he'll be my special guest at the Rhythm Room, and we'll play a much more conservative thing with Mike Harmon on bass. And then on Sunday we do a duet of some of the themes on the CD, and then Mike Harmon, my longtime bass player, he will join us, and that'll mostly be improvised music. I'm sure we'll throw in a standard or two, but mostly that's a kind of, as I say, we'll see you on the other side kind of a thing.
So on Saturday, the Rhythm Room, where is that?
That's in the Century Theater in Evanston, right upstairs.
Okay. So it's two different locations. One is the Cultivate, and the Century Theater is a little ways apart from there.
They're both in Evanston, but yeah, one is on Main and one is on Maple, I think it is.
Mm. So can you give students and our listeners advice about managing a musical career?
Well, yeah, you definitely need some kind of a structure, because I think just going off the top every day is a little tough if you're going to be serious about your career, and especially if you're like me, where you're kind of forced into being a band leader.
How so?
Well, like I said, my phone doesn't ring too much, and when it does, it might be a great thing. Like I got called once to play from the city of Chicago, and they asked me to join Julian Priester, my old colleague, and we did a thing. But those, you can count those things on one hand, how often those things happen. So
that's very interesting. Is it archived? Could our listeners access that performance?
I'm not sure. I know that the Jazz Institute records everything, but I just have a small sting of it at home in my own archives.
Do you remember what year it was?
Yeah, it was. I think it was 2007 or 2008. It was the 30th annual. And then when I lamented the fact that I couldn't seem to get into the jazz festival again, a friend who knows said, "Oh yeah, Jimmy, you can only play there like once every 10 years." So it's been about 10 years, and I guess I'm up for consideration.
I guess so.
We'll see. I'll definitely ask him this year if I can come in again. But yeah, so managing your career, I think if you have some kind of structure, I've heard stories that pianists, like certain well-known artists, they devote several hours every day to doing computer work, to writing and reaching out to people and cover letters. I think it's kind of funny that a lot of musicians, a lot of band leaders especially, become very good writers and very good at these kind of things, promoters and whatnot, because they have to. They're forced to do it. And so you're writing another letter, you're reaching out to someone maybe you don't know, you're having to pitch yourself and what you've done, and it's quite a bit of it's a unique thing, like, do you know who I am, kind of a thing, and you have to do it nicely. But how else are you gonna get a chance to play? And so I think and you have to keep working, because you don't want the thing to dry up, and you're not a practicing musician, so you have to always have something going, and that takes a bit of doing to make sure you have your calendar has a few things on there. And like so this past May, I always like to play on my birthday, May 22nd, but on this occasion I did not have a gig, and so I booked a friend of mine went into a studio and made a fine recording. But I thought I want to do something with music. I want to create something And I would have been very unhappy just going out to a restaurant and blowing out some candles or something like that. I wanted to be doing what I love, So in that case, you have to manage your career, set up a kind of a structure for yourself, and I'm just thinking of a friend of mine who just passed away, late Ralph Gill, and he was a dear friend in Houston, fine trombonist and very natural musician, and he was hanging around with Andre Hayward, who's well known. He's in the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, fairly large, big name in jazz now. But at the time, Ralph used to tell Andre, "Hey, let's forget about music for a few minutes. That's part of it too. Let's take a walk. Let's go and do something else, because when we come back, it'll be more fresh. You can get burned out as well.
Absolutely.
If that's all you focus on all the time." So I think a well-rounded approach to your music, your life, a bit of a healthier idea than just obsessive thing. I mean, I have to get away from it often, and when I do, I usually come back refreshed. And I just, no one wants to get burnt out. But yes, a little structure with how you're going to operate, a modus operandi for you. It's different for everyone. But for me, I like to practice a little bit every day with a pad. I like to learn something about drums I didn't know before. And I don't like to, but I do sit down and I follow up with my correspondence and chances for the group. And then I forget about it. I take my dog for a walk and I say, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. But I, on my end, I did everything I know to do.
So you said practice a little bit with your pad. What does that mean?
Oh, well, I have a drum pad, and it's just, I live in a small box, and so no, I don't want to hurt my neighbors, and I don't want them hurting me, so we respect each other, and I don't play my actual drums, but I have drumsticks and brushes, and oftentimes I set up in front of the computer so that I can actually take lessons with drummers who I find are very skilled, and I look at them, what they're doing, and pause the thing and see if I can do what they're doing. So this is very important, and when I don't do it, I feel not the ideal musician I have in my mind. My vision of myself is not strong when I don't practice, and so I feel more complete when I know that I'm practicing, I'm learning things, and I think that, as I say, 28 years in, I think that helps to avoid burning out or becoming stale or whatever it is that happens. And some of that's just natural, but you got to fight it, and you got to try to stay fresh and focused with these things.
Wow. So when you keep on learning, you are able to apply a lot of what you learn to what you're playing at the time. Do you often find serendipitous moments where what you learn fits in what you are doing at that moment? Sometimes it's natural. Sometimes you force it, and I don't always agree with doing that. And then sometimes you may practice something that would never appear in your actual music. But I think it's good to have that knowledge and that ability. Another great story is, Frank Sinatra, Sr. He was at a big ballroom gala event one time in the, I would guess, the 40s, and he noticed across the room was Benny Goodman, the clarinetist. And Benny Goodman was in the middle of this party. He was in the corner noodling on his clarinet. So Frank Sinatra sidles up to him and he says, "Hey, Ben, let me ask you something. Every time I see you, you got that clarinet in your mouth, you're fingering your horn. Why do you do that? Why do here we are at this beautiful party." And Benny Goodman looked at him and he said, "Because if I'm not great, I'm at least good." And when you hear about somebody like that being the best, there's a reason. He put the time in. He worked towards it, and that's what it is. There's no shortcut. It's actually a lot of hard work. You have to love it. You have to love it, or you're not going to make it. So you mean that Frank Sinatra, when he saw Benny Goodman and noodling with his trombone, he was actually practicing even at that party? It was
Yeah,
still learning?
he was. Yeah, it was his clarinet, and he was just quietly going over some exercises and some scales. He wasn't performing or anything. No, I don't think
see.
he was playing.
Mhm.
You know, it's just a quiet little thing. But, you know, I'm always drumming. I rarely am not drumming on my hands or my body or thinking about music. And I asked the great drummer Roy Haynes, who's still one of the great legends, who's still with us, Roy Haynes. I asked him if he practiced, and he said, "I practice up here," and he touched his head. So he thought about drumming a lot, and he's a marvelous artist. And so I think as long as you have that connection with sound all the time, it's gonna help. Things are gonna come out, you know. But no, it's specific things that I practice. I don't practice anything to where I can get on the gig and then regurgitate my practice session. No, it just helps me with facility and feeling confident when I do want to pursue an idea. I don't feel daunted so much because I know I'm in shape. I think I can make it. So
You're comfortable with your form and your skills.
exactly.
This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. We have in the studio with us today Jimmy Bennington, jazz drummer. And my next question, Jimmy, is are there warm-ups in drumming, such as there are warm-ups in voice?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's, our scales are called rudiments, and you can challenge yourself till the cows come home. I mean, there's many different things that will challenge you and frustrate you, but just simple things. I used to see when I was a kid, drummers playing on their shoes and playing on a pillow with some drumsticks in a dressing room, and I knew they're just warming up before they go on to the stage. And really, that's always important. But man, in a place like Chicago, it's even more important in the wintertime. You'll be going here and there, you're cold, and then you come in and you want your fingers to work, and there are many times when they do not want to wake up and they don't want to do anything because they're just too cold. So warming up is a good thing for just to keep in shape. You don't want any injuries if you can avoid them, and it gives you that idea that when the downbeat hits, you've already got some sweat going. You've already got a little perspiration happening before you've even started. So,
So, when you come in from the cold, do you and if you're shivering, that affects your play as well, because Chicago gets very cold in the winter.
oh yeah. Well, I'm half joking, but it is true. It does get cold, and it does affect your muscles and things like that. But see, and probably setting up the instrument itself takes a lot out of you. That warms you up right there, just setting things up. But yeah, I remember that years ago, my brother Roger and I, he's a very he's a different kind of a guy. He's like an athlete, and he's a very physical man. And so when we were in our 20s, he used to try to get me to work out with him. And so for a while, I was lifting weights and coming along fairly well. It's when you're a skinny guy, you kind of got to start from the bottom up, to build muscle. But I did get some muscles happening. But the thing is whenever I would finish my workout and go to, say, play jazz or play brushes on the drums, I would find my subtlety, my finesse, and my grace was gone, because of the lifting weights. And so I eventually cut that out.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't exactly understand, but I said, it's almost like lifting a bunch of weights and then trying to write in pretty cursive handwriting. It's not easy to me, so I chose the drums rather than being a muscle-bound guy.
So how did you discover that the drum will be your instrument instead of some other musical instrument?
Yeah, I guess you do have to discover. I mean, we all, I think it was just there, and once I just was drawn to the drums ever since I can remember. And when I was 5 or 6 years old, my parents actually got me a tom-tom drum, and I'm sure it was a toy, but I wanted to know what was inside. So when nobody was around, I got a hammer, and I busted a hole in the top to look in and see. But of course I ruined the drum, and that probably influenced my parents from getting me any for some time after that. And so every year I asked for them, and as a matter of fact, I would use Tupperware, pots and pans, and my drumsticks were, in the hangers. Sometimes they have the wire hanger with the cardboard bottom, and I used to take those cardboards, and that was my drumsticks, and I would play those until they broke. And I used to ask my mother when she would make a big can of something, I would ask her for the top of the can, and my brother would help me to put a hole in it, and I would put a sizzler on there, maybe a dime, and I would make a cymbal that way. And I had my little tin can cymbals and my different buckets and things until I got a real drum set. And then when I did get a real drum set, I was 13 or 14, I believe, and I got it at a garage sale right outside of my home. A man came for a yard sale and had these beautiful drums, and I spent the entire day mowing yards trying to, I think it was $5 a yard, and he was selling the drums for $100. So I was literally out there until the sun went down one summer in Houston, and so I earned those drums. And I don't think I'd ever had that much money in my life before, but I handed it over to the guy, and regularly I would take the drums all apart, and I would clean them and oil them, put them back together, and I felt this is what I mean about becoming one with the instrument. You really, I wanted to know, what are all these parts called? How do they work? What is it that makes this instrument what it is? I don't do that so much anymore. Sometimes you have to take care of your instrument, and it's not as much fun as it maybe used to be. But early on, everything about drums enamored me, everything, and so I just stuck with that, and so yeah, from a very, very early age, I knew that I loved music. And I used to sing in the living room by myself, and but drums seemed to be kind of a natural thing, and they found me and I found them. So
when did you start actually taking lessons?
That came several years. I mean, later. I mean, essentially when I was like 14, I wanted to bring these drums into the house, and my father. I was an adopted kid, and the man who adopted me, his name was Mr. Bennington, and he told me, I don't want you having these drums here unless you take them in school. So I got into the marching band, and before I took the drums, I had taken the clarinet. I played the clarinet for 2 years, I think, and I got pretty well at it, but it didn't fulfill me. And so once I got the drums, I got into the school band, and I started playing, marching and concert music, classical music. I loved that stuff. I've never been too good of a reader. I cheated a lot, but I think my natural ability helped me through. And then at one point, probably at the age of 17, those drums I told you about, they got stolen out of a garage apartment I was keeping them in. So I didn't have any money. I didn't live in a place anymore where I could even really play them. And so it was several years. I think it was not until I turned 20 that in 1990 that my Uncle Joe, I didn't know this at the time, but he was going to buy me a car. But he asked me what I wanted, and I took him to a music store, and I got a set of drums. So that tells you what a weirdo I am. I mean, most 20-year-old boys would love a brand new car off of the lot, but I've never regretted that decision. And I went and got the drums. He said, "Are you sure?" So I got these things, and he said, "If you're gonna get this," he set it up, and he had me take lessons 1 month, once a week for a month, from a very top in his class guy from Rice University who had just graduated summa cum laude or whatever they call it. So that gave me some essentials to begin with. And mostly I've just been self-taught since then, and I've also sought out people, drummers, who have taken me under their wing, and they saw that I was sincere, and they gave me a chance.
Well, thank you so much, Jimmy Bennington, for joining us on Wizard for this interview. And could you remind our listeners again the opening show for your new album?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, if you could play maybe one track, I think there's something on there that's not too long. You know, some of these are very long. But yeah, I will be with my friend and colleague from New York. Will be here this coming weekend, Steve Cohn, and he's approaching legendary status now. He's not a spring chicken, although he doesn't know that. But he will be here, and we will be performing at the Rhythm Room Bar and Bistro, my usual gig in Evanston, and that's at 7 p.m. on Saturday the 21st, and then the following day at 7 p.m. we will be at Cultivate Urban Rainforest and Gallery in Evanston as well on Main Street. And I believe that's a BYOB, the second one. The first one has a full bar and a restaurant and everything. But I hope to see some friends out there, and I hope people who want to see a really unique and original piano player, people who are interested in that kind of thing, do not want to miss Steve Cohn. But yes, those are the performances, and again, I thank you, my wizard, for having me today, and I thank Bill Morton and Bill Morton Promotions. He's a guy who supports me a lot, and I thank all my fans and friends. If the good Lord is willing and the creeks don't rise, we'll see you again so long.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. So there are 5 tracks. There's Nepalese Suite, Blue and Green, Cut Down, Quiet Now, and A Time When I Can Get Back to You. Which one do you want me to play?
Play track 3.
Cut Down? Okay.
Yeah. It's actually called Quiet Now. It's a bit of a thing.
Quiet Now. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There we go. This is Quiet Now.